All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Peter van Dijk. I work for PowerDNS. I have been doing that for 10 years. So I have seen many things. This talk is about the encryption of DNS traffic between resolvers and authoritatives. Frank talked about DNSCrypt already, which, like DOH and current DOT usage, encrypts from the stub to the resolver. The DNS Privacy Working Group in the IETF feels we should also try to encrypt the next step, even though there's a lot less traffic and personal data leaking there. The major problem with doing that, with encrypting that traffic, is for a resolver to figure out whether an authoritative supports encryption, what kind of encryption it supports, DOT, DOH, DOQ, etc. And, if necessary, what keys to validate when connecting to an authoritative. This talk will mention DNSSEC a lot, although this is not a DNSSEC talk because DNSSEC does not encrypt. The big problem with discovery of encryption for the transport between a resolver and an authoritative is that the delegation comes from the parent. So if you're looking up example.net, you will see here the delegation information from the TLD server. There are NS records. You're supposed to trust them, but they are not signed by DNSSEC. The only thing that is signed in a delegation response is DS records, which are for DNS keys. So if you want to talk to example.net or the example.net name servers with encryption, you still have a discovery problem. Now, if you go to the child zone, you see that all the data there is authoritative. So any information about an encrypted transport could live there, could be DNSSEC secured, but that takes one plain text query for example.com or example.net, at which point you have already leaked that you're going to visit example.com, and whatever subdomain you might visit next might not be as interesting in comparison. So a lot of the focus in the conversation in the DNS Privacy Working Group has been on what is acceptable. Can we accept a small leak at the beginning? Does that small leak go away if caches are hot, etc.? There are many positions, many opinions, and movement to standardization is generally slow. So 2 years ago, Manu Bretel from Facebook gave a great talk at IETF, and he basically lined out many possible solutions for signaling and possibly pinning this encrypted transport. If I had more time, I would repeat his presentation now, but I would like to leave time for the next speaker. So if you are interested in this, I recommend you have a look through his presentation, because many things in it have been said over and over again in IETF discussions over the last 2 years. Now, here's a bit of background that you will need to understand the next slides. You know DNS, you know NS records, you know A records, quad A records, etc. Here are two semi-recent additions to DNS. TLSA is a couple years old now. It is basically certificate or key pinning that you store in DNS, that you secure with DNSSEC, which allows you to have a secure transport to a web server, mail server, whatever, without relying on the CA system. This has not taken off for the web, but it is being used quite a lot for email today. This is probably well known. Even newer and not even done standardizing is the service binding record. It was initially specified for the web again, then it was reused for secure resolver discovery at a specific name. I think it was resolver.arpa with some underscore prefix before it, but it would also be very suitable for discovering the security features of authoritative servers. In this case, here are 3 records that say ns1.example.com does DOH on port 443 on this path. It does DOT on port 8530, and it does some other experimental protocol on port 5353. SVCB is a very well-defined spec, and it would work well here, except to find these records, you first need to do more queries that might be in plain text. So in the next slides, I'm going to take you through some of the proposals we've seen over the last 2 years, certainly not all, so you can get a feel for the problem space. In early 2020, Tim April proposed NS2. Basically, you redid the whole delegation system. It looks like SVCB from the previous slide, but it lives in the parent. This involves a major re-architecting of the DNS, including changes to resolvers, to authoritatives at the TLDs and not at the TLDs, and of course changes in registry operations. This was generally deemed to be too complex, and the proposal expired. Then mid-2020, me and a few other people took some of ideas from Manu's talk, which you haven't seen, of course, so I will explain what we did. We took the pub key from, let's assume, a DOT server. We encoded it into a DNS key. Then that gets hashed into a DS, put into the TLD TLD zone. And then if you were to connect to example.com, connect to the example.com name servers, you could connect to port 853 for DOT and know what private or public key to expect. This works. We have running code, but say example.com is hosted at Cloudflare, then you need to take the pub keys from the Cloudflare name servers, 2 of them, and put them in the DS records for example.com. Then there will also be 1,000 other zones running on the same Cloudflare name servers. So if Cloudflare then wants to roll their TLS keys, then all those thousands of zones will need their DS records changed. This is, without registry assistance, not a solvable problem. However, this proposal really got the conversation started in the working group. Not many proposals have come up between then and March 2021. At least not many that came in draft form. Many things have been said on the mailing list, but not many ideas have been fully written out. We proposed, let's not worry about all this authentication, etc. Let's not worry about that first plain text query that might be in a cache anyway. We put SVCB records on the name servers, like I showed in the SVCB slides. A resolver can lazily find those records and use them as long as they're in cache. Pretty soon after, Eric Skorla of Mozilla, with some co-authors, said, well, let's put SVCB in the parent. This is not something that we can currently deploy. The authoritative servers cannot do it. It does not fit the definition of what a delegation is. And of course, registries will have to cooperate. However, if this could be done, if we could put SVCBs in parents, then all our needs would be met. This is currently still under discussion. Then around July, so last month at the last IETF meeting, there was a big discussion on what records can actually go into a parent zone, because people have said, well, you cannot do that. Others said, yes, we can. We just have to change the registries. Then people said, well, the registries are not going to change. So we had a big discussion, and the current consensus is we have NS records that are unsigned. We have DS records that are signed. Besides that, we have the GLUE A and Quad A records. They're also unsigned. Then this month, Ben Schwartz of Google, he took the SVCB proposal. He took the verbatim DS digest that I proposed last year, and he said, well, let's just stick all of it into DNS key records and then into DS records. So given this name server for example.com, which would be unsigned data in the .com zone, signed data in the example.com zone, he says we take a DNS key, we give it some new number. The content of the DNS key is simply, again, NS and is one at example.com. Then we turn that into a DS record without hashing. We put that in the .com zone. And then you can find out name server names reliably authenticated and because they are signed. This means you can go look for the SVCB record at, say, again, the Cloudflare name server, get the transport information you need and connect to Cloudflare, do your example.com query without leaking any example.com query, except the one to the .com TLD servers, because we don't know if those will get encryption or not. This again has a smaller problem of, say, Cloudflare wants to change things because now there is an NS set and there's an associated DS set, but I imagine registries could automate this. So if we remember my second slide, what is signed? The NS set is still not signed. The DS records for DNSSEC are signed. And then in the middle of the screen, you get a new DS that contains the same data as above. Well, it would if I hadn't made a typo. Now you have signed data saying these are the named name servers for this zone. I have skipped many things that have happened over the last 2 years, but you should have a pretty complete picture now. The DNS Privacy Working Group has no lack of ideas, certainly no lack of badly specified ideas. What it does have is a lack of well-described ideas in draft form. What it lacks is running code. Your help is welcome. Let's see, I'm being mentioned. There are a relatively small number of DNS servers on the internet, and it seems like a third party could harvest most of the data that is needed. Rather than putting this in band, could we create a look-aside registry? Yes, look-aside registries have also been done when DNSSEC was not deployed a lot yet, but I am not a fan because you're putting important data about transport, perhaps even about key pinning or certificate pinning, in a second place that is not actively managed by the operator. So I'm not a fan of look-aside proposals. Somebody asked, has anyone consolidated all proposals in this solution space somewhere? Well, if you go to Manu's talk that I mentioned from 2 years ago, it is a pretty good overview of what is possible, although some of the ideas I have described are not exactly covered in it. But no, I'm not aware of a current document that covers everything that has been described. It might be nice to have, but for now you will have to go through the archives of DNS privacy. Let's see what else. Corey says, we lost the first part of that answer due to the music. That must have been the previous question. Right, so that's why I said all proposals harm performance because encryption is not free. Okay. I am answering questions. Yes, I was. All right, I see nothing else, so I am checking out again. Thank you for listening to me.